Hello friends, today we would be talking on a very important topic, and that is institutionalized form of treatment of the offenders. So let us begin. As has been rightly put forth by Nelson Mandela, it is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizen, but its lowest ones, and I unquote. To begin with, I would like to state, the paradox of our times is that with the advancement and the progress of the society, the conflicts, tensions, and the crimes within the societies are increasing. Crime today has become a major underlying problem of the society. We live in a society where crime and criminal activities are on a rise. Crime needs to be interpreted according to the situation and conditions in which they are committed. The penalty regarding this would be dependent on the severity of the crime committed by the offender. One of the most important aspects of the criminal law is the administration of the criminal justice system. The focus of the administration of criminal justice system is to protect the rights of the accused. The standard of justice delivered establishes the faith of the people in the justice system, which further establishes the standards of the society. Administration of justice means the time from which the suit gets initiated in the court till the time a judgment is pronounced. It generally involves two parties. One is the victim, that is the plaintiff, and the other is the accused, that is the defendant. The criminal justice system dispenses justice by apprehending, prosecuting, and punishing individuals who break the law. The criminal justice system revolves around protecting the accused rather than awarding him punishment. Now let us discuss the definition of crime. Crime does exist in the society, and to think that there is no crime committed in a society is an illusion. Crimes and criminals are the byproducts of any social system. Crime is defined as all the acts or the omissions which the society finds inappropriate and has decided that it wants to punish. This is the society's way of prohibiting conduct deemed to be in opposition to the interests of the citizens, their property, and the society itself. It can be taken to be something which is wrong and against morality, or generally called as moral wrongs. Simplest way to define a crime is to say that it is something which is against the law. In legal terms, crime is an intentional act or failure to act that is in violation of the criminal law, committed without excuse and penalized by the state. Criminal law are enacted to protect the people, property, and institutions. So, at this point, it is important to recognize the role which law plays in order to control the various offences in the society. In order to control the crime, punishments, both in form of corporeal and capital punishments, are imposed. Awarding of punishment is an indispensable part of the criminal justice system. Most people see crime prevention as the primary reason why criminal laws are enacted and why the criminal law is enforced. H.L.A. Hart wrote on the philosophy of punishment and stated that criminal laws exist and are enacted in order that fewer of the prescribed behavior should take place, and that general prevention is the primary justification for maintaining a system of criminal punishment. Now let us talk about treatment of offenders. Offender or a criminal is a person who has committed an offence. One of the important functions of the criminal justice system is to prevent the crimes from happening in the society, or the suppression of the crime where there are agencies responsible for the detection and investigation of crime, and if the person is convicted, then send him to the prison. Therefore, in order to control the crime, punishments are awarded. The basis of punishment can be found in the utilitarian theory as advanced by Jeremy Bentham, which states that, and I quote, "A prima facie evil that has to be justified by its compensating good effects in terms of human happiness or satisfaction," and I unquote. The philosophy of punishment is, number one, to isolate the offender from the public, usually through the process of incarnation. Number two, to rehabilitate the offender, usually by providing training and therapeutic services, both in the prison and the community. Number three, to deter the future crime in the sentenced defendant and in the society at large. Number four, retribution by making defendants pay for their debts to the society for having engaged in a criminal conduct. One of the methods that can be used in order to reduce crime is the proper treatment of the offenders. This would further lead to them not committing offences in the future that would lead to the reduction in the crime rate. Treatment of offenders was one of the pivotal roles of the criminal justice system. As far as the treatment of the offenders is concerned, it puts a responsibility on the criminal justice system to grant custody, supervision, and rehabilitation of the offenders. There are two methods that are involved. Number one, the institutional method of treatment. One of the most common forms of institutional treatment is imprisonment. The goal of imprisonment is isolation, retribution, meaning that you get tough on the criminal. Incarnation in jails or prisons is the preferred method for punishing the convicted criminals. And number two is the non-institutional method of treatment. Under the non-institutional method of treatment, the offender is sent back to the community, generally under the supervision, and this is an alternative to the institutional form of the treatment. In this form of treatment, rather than putting the offender behind the locked four walls, he is put in the society under the supervision. So this form of treatment is a substitute to the confinement. Now friends, let us talk about the institutional method of the treatment of the offenders. The last stage of the criminal justice administration is the correction of the offender. The intention behind the criminal law is to see that the crime rate is reduced, which would help in establishing a just and a law-abiding society. The two words, that is punishment and correction, are used in juxtapositions. The reason for the presence of crime and criminal in the society is the society itself. And ultimately, the non-acceptability of the offender in the society makes him a recidivist. A person is awarded a sentence depending on the crime he has committed, and the punishment is awarded to him under some law. Generally, a place where he is sent to commit a crime so that he may be kept away from the society is called as prisons. Historically stating, it can be said that Jeremy Bentham in 1791 wrote a 3-volume work in which he devised a blueprint for the design of prisons in order for them to be able to bring about the transformation of the behavior of the offender. Central to his idea was the surveillance. This would induce in inmates a state of conscious and permanent visibility that assures the automatic functioning of the powers. Surveillance was thus permanent in its effect, even if it was discontinuous in action. When a sentence is awarded to an accused, he is generally sent to a prison. It's pertinent to mention here that sending an accused behind bars should not be done with the intention to clear the old scores, but should help him in starting a new life. prisons fall under the category of institutionalized form of treatment of offenders. It is taken to be a correctional institution rather than a penal institution. It is a place where opportunities are presented to the inmates to change their attitude and behavior. The ultimate intention to put an offender in the prison is, number one, to deter the criminal, and number two, to reform the criminal. It is important that the objectives mentioned below are fulfilled once a criminal is sent to the prison. These objectives are, number one, punishment. The role of punishment is particularly designed to enable the society to get its own back on those who have committed some offense. It is important to understand here that the prisons have to be strict towards the inmates and not soft. Number two, reform or rehabilitation. We can, without an iota of doubt, state that rehabilitation has emerged as a key function of the prison today. The role of the prisons can also be seen to be as the rehabilitative institutions. Number three, incapacitation. When the criminal is put behind the prison, the inmates are prevented from committing further crimes, and it would reduce the level of crime in the society. And number four is deterrence. This means creating a threat of prison sentence that would deter the criminal to commit any further or future crime. The creation of deterrence heavily depends on the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. If the conviction and detention rates are high, it would create more deterrence, and if it's low, the crime rate would be high in such society. The present condition of the prisons was totally different from what was there in the olden times. The criminals put behind the bars used to live in terrible conditions, were ill-treated and tortured. The reason for this was to give the criminal back in the same coin to what he had given to the society. But slowly and gradually, with the advent of the Britishers, various committees were formed in order to improve the conditions of the jail and also to change the opinion towards the offenders. The offenders were put behind the bars to, number one, cut their connection from the society so that they were no longer a threat to the society. Number two, preventing the others from committing the offense under the fear that they would be sent to the prisons too. And number three, providing such conditions in the prisons where their reformation takes place. In an advanced capitalist society, a prison serves certain important ideological functions. Number one, an expurgatory function, getting rid of a sizable and an increasing proportion of the unproductive population. Number two, a power draining function, getting rid of them in a controlled way, draining off whatever power they used to have. Number three, a diverting function, diverting our attention away from the deviance of those who have power in our society. And number four, a symbolic function closely related to the diverting function. Now friends, let us talk about the rehabilitation of the prisoners. Once the person is convicted for the offense and the punishment is awarded to him, the next important step is the treatment of the offenders. A system's approach to criminal can be summarized in 4 R's. Number 1, revenge. Number 2, restraint. Number 3, reformation. Number 4, reintegration. The primitive and the most common form of approach adopted was the retribution or revenge, generally the legalistic approach under which criminals must be made to suffer. Under these principles, crimes are the expressions of the free will and the criminals are punished because they deserve it. This approach to punishment is akin to vengeance, since pain is inflicted on the transgressor for pain's sake rather than for a desire to bring about rehabilitation. But the method adopted these days is reformation. That means the attitude of the system and the society should be to reform the offender and not to be vindictive towards the offender. This form is based on the psychology and the sociology of the crime. Every possible opportunity should be given to him to adjust in the society, and the society should also accept him with the open arms. The idea behind this is to return the offender to the society possessing a new set of values and morals and a desire to contribute to the society. A person is not born as an offender. He commits a crime because of the social circumstances existing around him. Therefore, it is important how we rehabilitate the offender. It is motivated by the belief that it is in the worth and the dignity of every person and a willingness of the society to extend its time and energy, reclaim him for his own sake, not merely to keep him from harming the society. Sentences that require convicts to participate in rehabilitation programs are focused on the changing the offender's behavior so that they will be less likely to continue criminal activities after their release. Most of these programs apply psychological theories and research on human learning, cognition, and development to help the criminal change their thinking and behavior. The most effective rehabilitation program under the institutionalized form of treatment are those that follow basic learning principles and address the most changeable offender circumstances or characteristics. This further aims at altering factors that are directly associated with the criminal behavior. Specifically, it appears best to focus on rehabilitation programs on number 1, changing the attitudes and the thought pattern that give rise to criminal acts. Number 2, correcting deficiencies in education and job skills. Number 3, improving families and relationship skills. Number 4, raising self-esteem. This treatment requires a constructive program with adequate facilities and personnel for re-educating and reorganizing the criminal's attitude. Motivation, stimulation, ideas, and patterns of conduct is worked upon in this method of treatment. The question that is always debated is whether imprisonment of the criminal is done in the best interest of the society, or is it given to protect the interest of the offenders? The former belief suggests that prisons may serve as warehouses that quarantine or incapacitate those men and women who either cannot be deterred by the threat of sanctions or those whose actions are so harmful to the society that they are best kept away from the society. It has always been debated whether there has been a decreasing emphasis on rehabilitation. The change appears partly due to the growing belief that the rehabilitative efforts do not work and partly due to the impatience with its focus on the offender. The principle adopted is to let the criminals pay the price because they have harmed the society. The second view is that the criminals are sent to the prisons so that they can be reformed and rehabilitated because they have gone against the established principles of law. Now let us talk about the international instruments. It is important that when we focus on the institutionalized form of treatment of offenders, we analyze the various international aspects as well. One of the international instruments was adopted under the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of the Prisoners 1955, wherein these rules were adopted by the United Nations in 1955. These rules, though, were not legally binding, but they are very important to interpret the criminal justice system and reform in the prison administration. Old rules were reformed in 2015 and now are called as Mandela rules. It focuses on 4 major points, namely protecting the human rights of the inmates in the prison. Number 2, finding answers to the new challenges being faced in the prison administration. Number 3, changes being brought in the medical personnel. And number 4, rightfully using the disciplinary sanctions against prisoners for doing anything wrong. Now let us conclude. As has been rightly put forth by Mahatma Gandhi, hate the crime and not the criminal. Therefore, if we implement this saying in the criminal justice system, the concept of institutionalized form of treatment is very important to reform the criminal. In order to reduce the crime rate in the society, it is important that the punishment should be given to the offender. Maintaining prison is an important aspect. However, equally fundamental are the correctional values associated with them. Both the strength and the weaknesses of sending a person to the prison should be examined. Punishment options include imprisonment, probation, parole, open institutions, jails, etc. The roles of the prisons have totally changed in the present scenario. The status of the prisons have changed from an institution of retribution and deterrence that holds the inmate in custodial segregation to an institution of reformation. As it was rightly put forth by the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Khadak Singh versus State of UP, where the rights of the prisoners were recognized and it interpreted the right to life as more than animal existence. Therefore, it is important to understand that even if the form of treatment of the offender is institutionalized, still the rights of the offenders should be protected and respected, and fair treatment should be given to them. There should be no violation or torture that should take place behind the walls of the prisons. It is pertinent to mention here that the fundamental objective with which an offender is sent to the prison is to make him a better citizen, so that he, after coming out, does not commit any wrongful act against the society which is not acceptable to the society. So, the ultimate agenda of the criminal justice system is to see that there is a decline in the crime ratio, and one of the ways by which this can be done is putting the person behind the prisons. The institutionalized form of treatment makes the criminal become a law-abiding, self-respecting, self-supporting member of the community. They are tutored with a flamboyant understanding of things that are acceptable in the society, and hence they turn out to be the responsible citizens from dreadful criminals. With this, friends, we come to the end of the discussion of this lecture, hoping to meet you soon in another lecture. Thank you so much.